Okay, the panel session is actually called International Governance of Identity on the Internet, and I want to start from that wider context. And I want to start with the overview of the messages on internet governance that we took away from the workshop the BCS ran at this year's UN Internet Governance Forum in Bali. The key messages we took away were 7, and if you want them in detail, they're written here and you can get a copy there. I wrote them up for the Parliament and Internet conference when I came back. I want to start with the first one, which actually I think is incredibly important at the moment, and I'm surprised that I'm the first person who's really going to talk about Edward Snowden and the NSA. And the reason it's so important is because it speaks to trust. And to me, the key thing about identity on the internet is to get trust on the internet. And overwhelmingly, in all international discussions that you go to at the moment, Edward Snowden and what he's leaked about NSA surveillance really does dominate. And to my mind, these revelations, if they are revelations to you, which they may not be to this audience, have given an incredible additional impetus to what I describe as the call for the de-Americanization of the internet. That was already apparent at UN IGF 2012, and that was largely focused with real anger at ICANN. ICANN has actually moved incredibly fast in the last year, and we've now got Cyrillic, Arabic, Chinese top-level domain names. They've now moved out of California, have a center in Istanbul, and one in Singapore. They've done a hell of a lot in a year to wake up to that message of anger from various governments about what's seen as American domination of the internet. This year, there were 19 government spokesmen from lots of different places, and really every one of them mentioned the NSA. And the anger was most palpable from the Brazilians and from the EU representatives. It was also very palpable from all the human rights and privacy groups that appear at forums like this. It's an erosion of trust in both the US government and also in US industry. To be quite honest, that actually perhaps gives us a good chance of taking up some of that slack ourselves from the UK, because although every now and again people mention Five Eyes, the anger doesn't spill over nearly as much to Britain, which is very much a trusted place. But to me, the key thing about the internet is it's a global commons, and people are trying to make it a gated commons. Now, I think this is virtually impossible. There are 500,000 networks that make up the internet, so actually trying to gate a part off is quite difficult. Even the Chinese, who've been trying to do it for a long time, have found the Great Firewall of China can be penetrated by various people. However, the more you try and balkanize the internet, the worse it is for business. And this is something that I really, really passionately believe everyone in this room, everyone in the UK, should be trying to stop. We've got to make sure it remains an open place that everyone can do business in, everyone can talk in, everyone can be involved with. So that's really the strongest message that I have. I believe that the internet should be there to connect and liberate, and not divide and conquer. And we've really got to work on that. The second point is the importance of retaining the right to anonymity. And I'm going to expand on that, in fact, in a few moments even more, because it was key to all the discussions we've had in our workshops this year. I think some people wrongly are now trying to associate anonymization with child protection online. you can link any two things you want to, but they are quite different things. And I think, as a headline, there's an important point that I want to make, and that is that anonymization, if we take anonymization as being interacting online, the ability to interact online, should you so wish, without you revealing who you are, that's a very different thing from traceability. I mean, the whole argument about NSA is about traceability. And the answer is yes, you can't ever, if you're a purist and a technology person, you say you can't ever be anonymous on the internet. That's right. They can always work out the IP address you're coming from, and they can, if they so wish, people can work out who it is. I'm going to expand on that a bit more later. I think the third and fourth issues are also incredibly important. We've touched on these just a little bit today, but I think there's a lot more to be said. There are an incredible number of ethical issues associated with big data. And Snowden and the NSA is making people just think of big data from the point of view of government access to big data. But far more important is actually NGO access to big data. It's commercial access to big data. It's those aspects are really incredibly important. The collection analysis of massive open data online is here. It's not going to be stopped, and we've got to have a discussion about it. The fourth point, I'm even going to try and do a demo of this, which is going to be a bit of a nightmare, probably. The World Wide Web Consortium, as some of you may well know, is writing identity and payment standards for the internet. And I think this is potentially incredibly disruptive. And I think everyone here should really be involved in this, and I shall be coming on to that in a moment. The other 3 points are wider governance issues, which I'm just going to touch on, but I'm not going to talk about because they don't necessarily link to identity. And child online protection is an area which the UK has really led on as far as international agreements are concerned, and it's one of the few, I think it's about the only area I could say that there is global agreement on this. And I think all I want to say on that issue is that the ITU and UNICEF are at the moment publishing a set of guidelines about child online protection, which a lot of UK companies have input to, notably things like the Internet Watch Foundation, BT and so on. And I would really commend those to you, and I would commend you to look at them and take part in the consultations that are going on now. The next point is, I think, again, incredibly important, and that's education about safe use of the internet. It's really essential. It's something that we've all got to do. Everyone in this room is pretty internet savvy. You probably don't need help to understand how to do security, how to do the transactions you want online. But there are a hell of a lot of people who do need help to do whatever it is they want to do online safely. In fact, the BCS is working with GetSafe Online now and the National Fraud Authority and with ChildNet on public education in this area. And we're launching Cyber to the Citizen on the 16th of January next year, which we're hoping that all BCS members are going to be involved in across the country. It's coinciding with the National Fraud Authority and GetSafe Online BIS Cyber Street campaign and the ChildNet Safer Internet Day. And if you want to get involved in that, please do come and talk to me afterwards. The final point on global governance that really struck me, because I tried to go to a lot of the workshops that were about commercial issues. And that is that we're really hung up about copyright on the internet. I think it's because of things like the pirate parties in the UK and in Europe and so on. But really, what we should be hung up about is intangibles on the internet. There's much more value in intangibles like design and so on the internet than there is value in the copyright of music and literary works. And I mean, I think there are some enormous things that are going to happen that are happening now. I think things like 3D printing means that bespoke design can be done in one country, manufactured all over the world. Now, protecting that design on the internet is going to be quite a big global governance issue. And it's taking identity slightly wider, saying it's identity related to the individual, to the company, and to the thing and the product. And I think that's something that people aren't thinking about, and it really is something we should all be thinking about. So I said I would talk a bit more about anonymity. I think I'm in exactly the same place as I was last year about anonymity, namely that true anonymity is impossible, as I've already said, and that we should consider anonymity, as I say, and traceability separately. Traceability at its most benign, if you stop being emotional about it, is about protection and law enforcement. And I think the definition of anonymity that I like most, because there are lots of different definitions, and you can find, if you're talking about anonymity, you're talking past the other person if you don't look out. And as I say, it's how to interact online without being compelled to reveal who you are. And very interestingly on this, the vast majority of stakeholders think that anonymity on the internet should be retained. And yet there are pressures from our legislators here to say you shouldn't be allowed to be anonymous on the internet. And in fact, the Youth IGF group did a very good survey called Global Perspectives on Anonymity, which is available to download. And in this, with several thousand respondents, 86% of the young people said that you should retain anonymity on the internet. And that was despite the fact that in most of their experience, anonymity had done bad things to them rather than good things, i.e. people had said nasty things about them rather than nice things. But they still found that really important for all sorts of reasons, like being able to talk anonymously about their sexuality and various other things. Interestingly also, we did our workshop on identity at IGF. We did with OpenNet Korea. I don't know if people here know about OpenNet Korea. Right, okay. OpenNet South Korea are the people who won the case against the South Korean government. In 2007, the South Korean government produced a regulation that said that it was mandatory to verify user identity online to use any online service. And the OpenNet South Korea took them to the Constitutional Court. They won in August 2012, and the regulation was declared unconstitutional. And I think that's very important. I mean, the people from many countries were saying how important it was that they didn't, as other people have been saying here, use different identities in different places. You don't have to use one government-supplied identity for everything you do. And I think it's really important that that right to anonymity is retained. I think you have to educate people in manners on the internet, because people are definitely ruder on the internet than they would be face-to-face with most people. But part of freedom of expression is it allows us to say things that some people might find offensive. But if there's criminal activity, then that criminal activity should be prosecuted. So if there's harassment and bullying, that should be prosecuted. You know, that's not an excuse to say you can't ever be anonymous. The next one that I think is really important is the ethics of big data analytics. Again, I think Snowden is in great danger of diverting everyone's attentions away from many other things that are being done with big data. I mean, at the BCS, we've already said that commercial identity discovery through aggregation of data about yourself is really a much more serious thing than the likelihood of someone spying on you from an official government source. There are enormous privacy issues surrounding the data collection and data analytics. And it's really important that we have a rational, unemotional debate about this. We've got to decide, when does societal good outweigh personal privacy? Because there are times when it does. There were a lot of very interesting examples that people were giving there about use of massive online data. For example, some of you are probably aware, NGOs use the personal data from phones in both Haiti and Hurricane Sandy and many other disasters to find out where people actually were, to know where they needed to drop food, to look after people, to take people out of dangerous areas. Now, that is personally identifiable data. The geolocation on your phone is being used to say that's how we need to deal with this crisis. And indeed, I am continually evaluating for the European Union research proposals about how to do crisis management through using data on people's personal data on people's phones. Now, I think most people would say, oh yeah, that's fairly obvious. You can do that, but you can't get consent from someone in a crisis condition to use their personal information. So we've got to have a debate about it. There are also a lot of things that have been done, very interesting things, by civil liberties groups looking at oppression in repressive regimes like Iran at times of elections by looking at the way that internet traffic is squeezed by the state to say, okay, yes, we can see that they're trying to make sure that no one can go out and use the internet to disrupt the way we want this election to go. Now, is that a right thing or a wrong thing? I think we should be having a discussion about it. And I think it's got to be sensible, it's got to be an international, rational discussion, not, oh, everything's terrible because NSA have done this, but look, when is it good, when is it right to use personally identifiable data? The final one I wanted to cover in some detail was how many people know about these new standards the World Wide Web Consortium is bringing out? I don't want to teach my... Not too many, one or two hands, but not that many. Well, the World Wide Web Consortium, Web Payments Group, PaySwarm, nearly 400 companies are in that, and as far as I can see, and I haven't gone into all the coding in much detail, I have to say, Mozilla seems to be leading the way in actually putting some applications on this. I think that if there are open standards for ID and payments out there, it's going to make an enormous difference to the use of the internet. And one of the things that they're expecting is that the 2.5 billion or so unbanked will be able to use these standards reasonably well for small-scale financial transactions. So I think it has a lot of implications for financial institutions, governments, telcos, other payment solution providers, tech companies, and, as I said, the unbanked. I think that when I was talking to the people who are involved with this, and Manu Sporny particularly, who's the CEO of PaySwarm, he said their biggest problem was they can't engage with legislators and regulators. Well, I would suggest that in the UK, they really do need to, we need to engage with them because they need to be compliant with the kind of banking standards we have here. We like to think of ourselves and want to be a global banking centre, the global banking centre. If we do, I think we've got to engage with these new forms of payments, these kind of new internet initiatives, and we've got to help them to be compliant in a regulatory sense. So it's a decentralized ID, it has a secure digital signature. You create an ID with the PaySwarm authority. You associate a web key with it for your encryption. You register it with the PaySwarm listing service. You construct a purchase request and sign digitally. You then get a receipt of the transaction ID and a contract. That's how the whole system works. And they even make sure you pay the right taxation on it if the country wants you to. I think there's a major opportunity to engage, and they're going to be having a meeting in Paris on 25th, 26th of March next year, a workshop where they're keen for any interested parties to go there and talk to them. And I think some of you may want to be involved with that.